for joining this session. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you physically at the summit, but I hope that you're enjoying your day. Today, we're going to talk about the role of active metadata lake in any successful architecture. And you will notice like between the curly brackets that there is like a concept called active metadata, and then there's also active metadata lake. And that would be my focus for today for you to explain, and I hope also that you can learn that this concept as well with me. But then let's start with our agenda. So the first thing in our agenda would be starting from scratch. Okay, what's metadata? And then we'll talk about the types of metadata that exist, and then what this concept that's called metadata lake mean, and what it brings to the table of the data architecture. And then we'll dive into the topic of active metadata, and at the end we are going to wrap up with some use case to really make it tangible, so there will be a balance between theory in the first 4 points and then practical experience at the 5th one. So what's metadata? So the classical definition is it's data about data. We all know that, but let's just look into it from a different perspective. Imagine that this is like the raw data that you have in the organization, being it in kilobytes, megabytes, or even terabytes, it doesn't matter. It will look like this. And it's really hard to identify what each column of these means. So for example, what this 110 means, or the 30, or the AF or AL, because it's quite hard to understand the real data without metadata. But once you introduce a very small metadata like a header, like in this thing now, it really starts to make sense. So for example, you see here employee number, salary, age, and nationality. So yeah, okay, now I understand a little bit. And if you keep adding metadata, like here for example, the salary of employee, it's in K, in thousands. This is the age of employee per year. This is a nationality which comes from an alphanumeric 2-code standard. Then you can really understand the real data. And also, metadata will trigger a lot of things in your mind. So if you look now and you know that this is a salary, so probably this minus 28 is suspicious and could be a data quality issue. And also maybe the 200 thing is 200K is too much. Maybe there are people who are taking 200K, of course, but let's say in that case, if you have some anomaly detection, you can spot that right away. And if you start to join it with another record, like the null record here, then most probably this record doesn't make sense. So, and so on and so forth. If you go for the age, it's less likely that you have a 150 years old employee in your company, and also someone that doesn't have a nationality. Could be a valid reason, by the way, but at least the metadata, once we've added to the data, it starts to trigger a lot of, let's say, questions in our mind, and that will help us to understand the data more. So you can see like metadata truly enables data quality, data gap management, data mapping, and also transformation, and a lot of the data related activities as well. So truly metadata is a key to unlock value from data. So it is sort of the key that opens the data for you in order to really make it tangible, because metadata provide a context to the data that enable the discoverability, data quality, data observability, and most important, it makes you understand the real data. So now let's jump to the types of metadata that exist. So we have 4 types of metadata. The first one is business metadata, and business metadata is talking about, let's say, a category of metadata that describes the aspect used, for example, in governance, in finding and understanding the data. So things like, you know, where is my data set? What is my data set? A description of my data set. Who is using this data set? Who is the owner of this data set? Who is the steward? Where is it stored? In which application? And of course, the pillar of data ownership. Who owns the data? Who is the data steward? Etc. etc. So all these metadata can be classified as business metadata. Second type is technical metadata, and that's mostly the commonly known one, which goes into the system details, dataset structure details. For example, what's the name of the application that holds my CRM application? Oh, it's Oracle or Teradata. What kind of technology is being used there? Who is the application owner? What kind of database is it? Let's say the schema definition, the columns, the rows, the user-defined function, if there are any conditions, and so on and so forth. All of this can be classified as technical metadata. The third type is operational metadata. This is type of metadata that gets generated on the runtime activity. So if you are running a data pipeline, for example, that takes data from A to B, it generates logs while it runs, right? So any logs that can being collected or processed can be classified as operational metadata, and you can really use them in some of the use cases which we are going to discuss. So you can also answer some question: what's the system utilization? Are we utilizing the hardware that we are renting, for example, in the cloud? How much resource unit is being used, etc., etc. Sorry. The fourth type is social metadata, and social metadata has to do with, let's say, the who is logging, for example, to my system, from which department, from which organization unit they are hitting my application. How can I improve the user experience of the person who's using my application based on little bit of metadata that I should know from where this person is coming in the organization, so I can customize, let's say, the metadata to him or her. And what's really truly beautiful is if you manage to combine all these types together, somehow that will really truly unlock the data potential that you have. So imagine with me that you can jump from, let's say, operational metadata. So you take a pipeline that runs for like 10 hours in your organization, then you say, I need to know more about it. So, okay, I have that operational metadata, so that's why I got to know it takes 10 hours. And then I can zoom in, okay, show me all the technical metadata that's associated with this pipeline. So you get to know the system that's reading from, the system that it is populating to, and also all the transformation in the middle. And then you can say also that, oh, okay, but this source may be too big for this data pipeline, so can I know more about who's the data owner or who's the application owner of this data set? So you can zoom in and utilize the business metadata as well. You can also jump from any type to another, so you can go from a business metadata, you search for a data set, let's say client, and then see how it is being used, let's say, in all the operational metadata, and also what kind of technical details it has, and the social metadata who uses it. So it is really the juggling between the four can really truly help you to understand what's going on with your data. And that's why I want to introduce and propose to you this architectural name that's called Metadata Lake. Yeah, a lake that is designed to collect all types of metadata and connect them together in one kind of a system, and then allow you to report and utilize all that metadata to be at your fingertip to really do advanced, let's say, analysis and a lot of use cases. So focusing on the metadata lake, what's metadata lake? It's an architecture proposal that will have the ability to union and collect all types of metadata under one roof, and then it should enable certain capabilities, and those capabilities are listed here. So it should be able to store all types of metadata, combine them together, integrate them, generate new insights out of it, and maybe also profile it at a certain point of time, because you can also have data quality in your metadata, and then verify and then process all kind of metadata in one kind of one central place. And that's really will give you like a really good potentials to unlock the metadata capability. So this is a sort of a reference architecture that how it may look into practice. So if you have some systems in your application, think of it as your CRM, your billing, your, let's say, marketing, all the applications that you have within your organization that can have system or subsystems, they produce metadata. And then if you manage to gather those metadata and put them into a metadata lake, then that's really where it starts to make the most value. And this you will notice here in under the metadata connectors that you either custom build some connectors or use ready-made technologies for that. And I think that's something that you have to evaluate based on the tooling and technology that you use in your organization. And then the metadata lake is the data is being harvested using the connectors and then stored in the lake. And here we have used SQL and NoSQL combination because we wanted to get the flexibility of NoSQL and also the durability and let's say the effectiveness of SQL database. But it's up to each use case and its characteristics. And after that, you can run use cases directly into the metadata lake, or for example, you can feed it to your central data marketplace where your data provider and a consumer are interacting. So you can customize it the way you like, but this is already from a practical experience. This is how we build it. Sorry. Now we'll jump into what makes metadata active. So what's active metadata? So active metadata is actually to put the harvested metadata that we've spoken about into action. So take the operational metadata, for example, and then let's say develop a dashboard that give you the top 10, let's say, most time consuming data pipelines in your organization, and then deep dive in one by one and see if there are potentials to understand it and then even make it better. So what if you can use, for example, machine learning to apply it to the metadata that has been collected, so you can really get the value of operational excellence, for example, cost savings, and better optimize your data pipelines. And the most kind of way that we are dealing with data now is being it metadata as passive. Passive means you just collect metadata, maybe show it in a sort of a catalog tool that you use in an organization, and that's it. But without putting it into action, then that's really where the value really comes on. And in the upcoming slide, I will explain and I will tell you a little bit about some use cases that can be used to make your metadata active. So let's look at 3 of them. So the first one is active metadata can be used in proactive data quality monitoring. So if you have collected all types of metadata and you know, for example, from a technical metadata that this column should not be null, then just that piece of information you can run a nullability check automatically without having the necessity of someone to define that quality check for you. So if you have like a machine learning algorithm that you should train and make it, whenever you see that condition in a metadata, automatically create a data quality check and run it against the data and then show me the outcome of that so I can take an action on it. So that's really also a use case that I've built together with a previous company as well, and it's really magnificent because it really saved a lot of time of our data owners to create and detect all these scenarios automatically. But this is just, let's say, the technical checks. You can also define business checks. If you know from a business metadata that this data in combination with this data, for example, the age should not be less than 18 years old, but also the income should be more than XK, you can also, using some machine learning, detect those and also suggest it to the data owner, hey, you know what, based on the metadata, the combination between business and technical metadata, we think that this data quality rule can be proactively done. Do you want to apply it or not? That level, that's really what makes, let's say, metadata active. Second use case is you can also use it in active metadata, like to improve the data context. Sometimes we have a lot of data that's called dark data in the organization. Data that has been lying there, no one knows from where it came and who's the owner of it, etc. But it could also contain very important information. So how would you know if this data is of so importance under also all the guidelines and also all the GDPRs, etc. Metadata can really, if you can scan the data and then detect from the metadata, the type of metadata, it can help you to understand what the dark data that you have in your organization mean, and also suggest, okay, a better naming so it can be more visible, or maybe better action like deleting them or even find an owner for it, etc. That's also very powerful. You can also use active metadata for privacy and regulation as well. So think of BRI data, for example. If you can, if you know the pattern of, for example, a social security number, and then you're having this information from a catalog, you can run it against the actual data and then detect that and suggest and do also labeling of your data based on that metadata. And you quite see that often in most of the data governance tools that exist in the market, that you also active labeling of your data. And if you wonder how they do it, it's just metadata. So they have a category or a dictionary of all, let's say, the types, and then using regular expressions, they can see if you have like 3-digit and a dash and a 3-digit and a dash and a 3-digit and a dash and a 3-digit, that's high likely to be a credit card number, for example, or a social security number or whatever. So all this metadata can put into action. It will make also a very beautiful use case for improving your privacy and also being more compliant. Now, we've got to know active and we've got to know the lake, so let's put them into action and talk about a real case. So this real case happened to happen on Power BI. Power BI is a tool from Microsoft that does business intelligence. So what happened there is we have a lot of users that connects to Power BI, and since it's easy, intuitive tool, a lot of dashboards and reports has been created through the years. But then the problem with these tools, for example, like Tableau, it's not just, by the way, only for Power BI, but it goes for MicroStrategy, for all the other BI tool, that they made it too easy, which also can lead to some chaos in the organization. And I will explain what I mean by that. But let's take it step by step. Tons of users, thousands of them in your organization are creating dashboards, but you have no idea based on what they are using the data, what kind of report, what kind of data is being for what kind of report, to whom actually in the organization. And that's what we are going to unlock together now. But to do that, first you need to gather a metadata out of Power BI. So Power BI happened to have a very good API that allows you to connect to it and extract metadata. It's called the Scanner API. So what we've done, we've connected to Power BI API. We gathered a bunch of JSONs and we had to reverse engineer it in order to understand what it means. Then we've ingested it into the metadata lake. And inside the metadata lake, we managed to do some basic analysis of them. So for example, how many reports do we have, how many active reports, how many unused reports, like simple analytics there and there. But then we really started to unlock the beauty of this once we connected that metadata, which can be classified in this case as technical metadata, with the business metadata and the operational metadata that we have already in the lake. Then it starts to really kick in and do more of the KPIs that I'm gonna explain in the next slide, and then also made it to take action to improve our data and also data strategy. And that's really make it active as well. So to give you a final thought of what actually we have been able to detect. So let's see on this slide some of the KPIs and also the action that we have taken just based on this simple, let's say, use case. So first of all, we've got to know the data usage in the organization. So using this metadata, we've been able to, for example, know the types of sources that's being used in the organization. So for example, in let's say 20%, this is just hypothetical numbers, 20% of our reports and dashboards are being used from Teradata, 60% are being used from Hadoop, and then let's say the remaining 20% are being done from a local files in some personal folders. And you would be actually super surprised if you run such an analysis in your organization, because we also were shocked in a way, because we found a high percentage of people using either, let's say, a technology that we should have been, let's say, decommissioning in 2 months. It's being used in more than 50%, and 40% or less of this also other type of sources were done based on personal folders of people. So for example, Mahmoud folder has an Excel sheet, and based on that Excel sheet, there's another Excel sheet, and there's a data wrangling step in the middle that joins to, and then you have a Power BI dashboard that's being used in by a C level member in the organization. So that's really unlocked a lot of potentials for us, and also made it realize that, okay, we need to take something serious here. For example, to get a list of all the people who still uses this old technology, and then ask them why you are doing that, and maybe also help them. So it's not just about capturing, but also helping and improving. So that was one of the most powerful KPIs. Second one is also naturally also leads to data security, because if most of the people are using personal files, that's really a security breach. And if there's an audit or any kind of review, that's really risky. Plus, of course, the accuracy and who's going to manage this data, the data quality aspect, and the data, let's say, continuity as well. That's not really ideal situation. Another KPI was, for example, top 10 dashboards. So we got to know, okay, the top 10 used dashboard in the organization, so we can even improve them better and also ask the right question. Are they getting the data from the correct sources? Yes or no? Do they take much time? And is there something that we can do? And that actually led us to more of doing a thorough impact analysis and then handle the data in a better way, so it becomes super fast as well. Also, unused dashboard. This is one of the most important ones, because there's tons of reports that are not used, but still they are costing money. They are blocking the quota that we have in the cloud, and then also creating unnecessary, let's say, headache. And then better, you can also decide to delete them or archive them. So that's also one of the KPIs. You can also analyze the usage per department. So you, for example, if you are working in travel industry, you expect, for example, certain department to use the data to be more data driven than others, or maybe the other way around. And if you classify that, and that's really combining operational metadata, with technical metadata, with business metadata, you can really slice and dice and then understand how the data strategy is being used within the organization precisely, up to even a team level if you want, or further, or people as well. You get also to know the user demographics, who is using these tools, for example, in your organization, how many of them are senior managers, how many of them are, let's say, data engineers, you can classify the data by title, per department, per block, if you use blocking system, whatever you have in your hierarchy. You can also classify and understand the big segment that's using the data and the low segment, and if the low segment can trigger something, if let's say the data analyst or the less segment, that doesn't make sense because they should be empowered by data. So you can also challenge that and see what's going on. You can also go to the top used data set. So if you went to the top used dashboard, but also top used data set, and then see, okay, if they are correct to be used, or if there's like a better approach, and also help you in, for example, migration projects in the future, to give priority for these top used data sets and data sources instead of just, being clueless in your data migration. And the last but not least, which is not shown here, but it's the worst performing dashboard. So you can also analyze the worst performing dashboard and then project that if they are being used by senior people, then you have a dilemma here. So either to challenge if they are the correct one, or if they are the correct one, for example, then how can I improve the performance of them? So all these are just, let's say, 8 KPIs of a lot more that led the organization to improve and also opened a lot of tracks, just based on this simple idea of gathering some metadata from one tool in the organization and join it with other metadata types that we have. And then, as you have seen here, you can do truly marvelous stuff with that. Imagine how much would it be if you have all the metadata of your application under one roof called the Metadata Lake. I think you just need to fill in the details and then figure out the use cases based on your organization yourself. That was my story for today. I really hope that we will stay connected. What you'll see here in the first QR code is a detailed article about this session, because of course 25 minutes is not enough, and I would love to you to also to know more, so you can go through this in your own pace. The second QR code is a session that I've recorded that explains how metadata can be enabler for data mesh architecture, if that's something that you would like to explore. And the third one is just my LinkedIn profile, in which I would like to stay connected. If you have a similar experience, or if you want some advice, if you want anything, really, let's stay connected. I'm willing to exchange some information with all of you. And reaching to that level, I would really thank you. My name, by the way, Mahmoud, and I work for Booking.com as a senior data manager. Thanks a lot, and stay tuned, and see you. Bye-bye.